podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Salah. Escape Cancelo. Oh, it's brilliant from Mo Salah. And still, Salah. Oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne. That is what Martinelli gorgeous. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your hosts, Tiriwa Chanakira.
Welcome to A Tad Predictable, the post-season edition. I'm super excited to be joining you guys during the course of this summer transfer window, summer for clubs, summer for the UK. Hopefully the sun shows up for us in a big way. Obviously there's Euros that are coming up. There's a whole host of things that are going to be happening before the 24-25 Premier League season starts. But before we get there and before we discuss further what I'm going to be doing during the summer window, obviously let's talk about the break that we had to take towards the end of this past season, the 23-24 season. We obviously, unfortunately, were not able to record some podcasts over the last couple of weeks. It was good news. Don't worry, guys. Everyone's good. Everyone's in a happy place. It was good news why I wasn't able, and the buck stops with me. I wasn't able to record A Tad Predictable on a weekly basis for the last couple of weeks of the season. Hopefully one day I'll be able to share that news with you, but don't worry, everything is good. I'm super excited. It was a massive life event for me. And I appreciate those that have stuck around and have joined us now for the post-season edition of A Tad Predictable. We're going to have some fun. Obviously we're going to be discussing everything that's related to the English Premier League from a post-season perspective, all the madness that surrounds it, from transfers to contracts to team tours. We'll have it all covered. We will have it all covered. And we will also be running what I'm really excited about. It's effectively a Cliff Notes type series where I'll be looking at each of the teams in the next year's EPL season. That's the 24-25 EPL season. How this previous season ended for them, their aims for next season, and what they need to do this summer to achieve those goals. That series will be running Monday to Friday, and each podcast will be dedicated to one of the 20 EPL teams. And we'll obviously go in alphabetical order because that just makes life easier. And we want to make life easier for Guy Drinkle, our executive producer, and all of the staff that are involved with A Tad Predictable podcast, don't we? But yeah, guys, before we go on to sort of those Cliff Note episodes that will be starting from tomorrow, obviously we'll start in alphabetical order. So Arsenal will be the first team that we cover. I thought it was important that we sort of let's finish the 23-24 season. Let's wrap it up. Let's put it in a bow, archive it. Some of you obviously will want to hold on to it a bit longer than others. Some will be hoping to forget about it, like Man United when it comes to league form, would not have enjoyed what they saw this season, in my opinion. And then we will end the show with some proper awards for this past season, not the PR campaign that currently is the EPL Awards. I'm sorry, but I'm not a fan of how they run the EPL Awards at the moment, the Premier League Awards. It seems like a glorified media hype campaign, PR campaign, and they don't really get to the crux of it. And I'll get to it when we get to that, and that will obviously be towards the end of this show. But yeah, let's also talk about the elephant in the room, because the season of A Tad Predictable sort of ended abruptly. We didn't get to go through all 38 games for this show. We didn't get to have some of the guests that we did want to come and challenge who is now effectively the champion, the new champion of bank it or burn it, executive producer Guy Drinkle, he got the highest score last season, the season that's just gone on. And I'm going to give it an asterisk. I think it's an asterisk title. I think he didn't get to compete with everyone else in terms of a full 38 game season. Yeah. He's also the executive producer. I don't know how he gets away with being part of the competition. He's been trying to win it for the last however long this podcast has been running. Finally, Mr. Guy Drinkle is the winner of Bank It or Burn It. But as I said, I think it's an asterisk title. I think it's a Fugazi title. I don't think he deserves it. He's a fake champion. Hashtag fake champion, Guy Drinkle. But yeah, huge congratulations to him for winning that title. Obviously, a huge, giant trophy is going to be shipped towards him. Hold on to your horses in terms of make sure, guys, please send prayers if you can, to make sure that this guy doesn't blow our budget for next season, because he threatened last season, if he did win it, that he was going to blow the budget. Fortunately, last season he didn't win it. Jake Jackman won it, but now with Guy Drinkle at the top, I'm worried. I'm worried about what he could do, but we hopefully we will have a 24-25, a tad predictable season. But guys, as I said, I wanted to put a bow on the 23-24 season, and you got to start with the champions. Huge congratulations to Manchester City. I kept calling them the freight train. I did warn you guys throughout the season, don't let them get going, because once they get going, they're impossible to stop, or near impossible to stop. You almost have to beat them by Feb, maybe March, when they start sort of turning their attention to the Champions League for like properly, because it's the knockout stages and they're now facing teams that they can't just bully. That's usually when you want to have City beaten by, so that they say, okay, all right, the league's not ours. Let's focus on the other 50 trophies that we're currently involved in, because they usually go deep in all of the competitions. Unfortunately for Liverpool and Arsenal, they did not do that. City were in the conversation throughout the season. They kept, they kept distance, but not enough. It wasn't enough distance to dissuade City from going for the Premier League. And we saw what City is all about. Just a machine that is built to win titles. That is effectively what City is now. Obviously, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the 115 charges that have been laid. We will await the outcome of those. I'll hold my tongue on that. In terms of that whole process, let's wait and see how it all settles, and then maybe I'll speak on it. I'll see if I can speak on it after the verdict has been read out. But yeah, let's leave that one. I'll quickly move on before I say or get myself in any more trouble than I would like to. But as I said, huge congratulations to Manchester City, the freight train. Arsenal, I think Arsenal fans are finally feeling what Liverpool fans have been feeling for the last couple of seasons, where Liverpool were just not good enough. They just got pipped to the title year and year by Man City. But Liverpool fans are turning around and saying, look, Arsenal, you weren't even as close as we were. We got to 97 odd points and still lost the league title. Arsenal in the 80s? Yeah, like that's not even 89 for Arsenal. They didn't even break 90. And they're feeling, hard done by and woe is me. So yeah, imagine getting to the 90s and not winning a title, being one of those teams that could have won a title in any other year other than that year that you ended up losing it. Obviously, you can tell my Liverpool fandom is bleeding in there. But yeah, I think Arsenal are strong contenders for next season. Probably one of the most settled teams in terms of the big teams. We know with regards to Pep Guardiola, there's uncertainty with whether he's going to continue after next season. I think there's going to be a few changes from squad perspective for Man City. We'll see how we all know they're going to be contending, if not favorites for next season. Why not? They keep doing it back to back to back to back to back. But I do think Arsenal, the continuity there, are probably in with a really good chance to go and try and win that title again. We'll see whether or not losing it by this closer margin is going to dishearten the Arsenal players, and they're now going to be dejected by the amount of effort they put in, yet they still came short. Or they could do what Liverpool did that one time, where it ended up being motivation, and that's what they used to galvanize them for the next season. One thing I will say for Arteta is you have to treat the big games against City like must-win games. That's the one thing Jurgen Klopp ended up learning. Draws and losses are not enough. You have to go and beat City if you want to take the title off of their hands. It's that close at the top. It's what is expected now. It's what City demand. If you're going to win the title, come and beat us, and then maybe you'll win the title. But yeah, we'll skip past Liverpool. I think disappointing for some people, obviously because of the fairy tale that was Jurgen Klopp leaving. Maybe he leaves with a whole tray of trophies, but we all know football is not a romantic comedy. It's reality. And I think reality hit Liverpool quite hard in terms of them still being in that rebuild phase. I don't think they've finished rebuilding that midfield. I think they sort of half-assed it, if I can say, when they brought in Endo as the CDM, especially after, I think, bidding 100 million. Are you kidding me, for Caicedo? And then you end up signing a Stuttgart, relegation battling defensive midfielder. Mad respect to Wataru Endo, but there's levels to this game. And I think Liverpool saw that, ending up having to play McAllister as a CDM in 23-24. Come on, man. Aston Villa, huge props to Unai Emery and Aston Villa. He's, spoiler alert, he's my coach of the season. I know we're going to do awards at the end of the podcast, but he's my coach of the season. I don't care what anybody says. What he's done at Aston Villa is tremendous. If we said at the beginning of the season that they were going to get fourth, I don't think many people would have taken it. You look at some of the juggernauts that they were able to hold off in order to get that fourth spot, and they were still competing in Europe. Don't forget, some of those juggernauts didn't have European football. They were focusing on one game a week, so to speak, and still fell short. So I think Unai Emery and Aston Villa deserve a huge ton of credit for the work that they've done there. And their owners are ambitious. Hopefully for them, they keep building and building and building, and we get to see them be a real force again in English football. I'll move on to Chelsea. We're sort of working our way down the Premier League table. Some teams I'll skip over. I think these are the ones that I really want to highlight. With Chelsea, I know they were ridiculed for majority of the season, but I always said throughout the season, they've got talent. They've got really, really talented players. Yes, they sort of football managed their way into the squad build and how they approached it, and the ridiculously long contracts and trying to, skirt in the gray area of the rules, if I can say, with regards to how they brought in so many players and the money that they spent and the contracts that they gave out. But at the end of the day, football is played on the pitch. Whether or not, the off the field legal battles, we've seen it with City, for example. Those charges are from years ago. They're still winning trophies because what happens on the pitch, that's what those players and the coaches care about. And for Chelsea, they've got a ridiculously talented side. It was just about getting them to gel, getting them to mesh together, getting them to have purple patches in the similar time frames. Because remember, they're still young. They've got a very young squad. Well, certainly the important players are quite young in that squad, and that's how they did their rebuild. Young players are inconsistent. So Chelsea were always going to struggle to try and, I didn't think they were going to challenge for a title. I thought at best case scenario, they would have been coming fourth. And I thought that would have been a tall task in the first season of this rebuild, if you can say that they're trying to do so. Yeah, I expected the talent to sort of rise to the top eventually. Surprised that they got rid of Pochettino. I think that's a big mistake. We will see whether or not they rue that in the coming season. I'll move on to Newcastle, who obviously finished 7th, just below Chelsea, and obviously the implications of the FA Cup and what that meant to Newcastle's European hopes for next season, it had knock-on effect. I think Newcastle realized that it's not a straight line to a top, and I'm going to be keeping a close eye to see if they can manage those hills and valleys that comes with trying to get to the top. It wasn't going to be just a season upon season, you're always improving. I think that's a very, very difficult thing to do, especially in this day and age where the financial fair play does come into the situation, or profit and sustainability rules, if you want to use that term. It's different to when City were coming up. So I think it was always going to be ups and downs, as I said, the hills and valleys, and they're going to have to manage that and slowly work their way up. There'll be good years, there'll be bad years, but the structure needs to be there in place. I'm not sure yet if they've fully got that structure that they do want in there for the long term. So that's probably the big thing for Newcastle. Get that structure in place. Decide how you want the club to run for the foreseeable future and in the long term. And then obviously this season, because of, them not maybe reaching some of the goals that maybe not necessarily even what the club would hope, obviously, to finish as high as possible, but certainly the players would have had goals and aspirations to play Champions League football again next season. Some of those players might want to leave. Some of those players are now players that say, I play Champions League every year, or I'm not playing for you, type of thing. So that's going to be interesting. Can they reinvest? If an Isak goes, if a Guimaraes goes, can they reinvest and still be competitive? That's going to be what we're going to keep an eye on with Newcastle. Obviously, Man United, as I said, quite a disappointing season for them in the league. I think they're just a cup team. A team that sits back on the counter-attack when they're a big team is built for cups, because we know that teams are going to come and attack you in cup games. They have to, because someone has to win the game. So I think that suits Man United. But in the league, not every team is going to attack them. In fact, more teams are not going to attack them in the way that they get attacked in cups in the league. So they have to adapt their style of play. And I don't think their style of play suits going for a league title, especially with the way the league has sort of developed over the last couple of years. You have to go and take the league title from a Man City. You can't play counter-attacking football the way that Man United do and expect to accumulate the points that are required to topple Man City. I just don't think so. I think also, obviously, the squad is a mess at Man United. They're, hopefully, for their sake, I guess, they're trying to fix all of that. So we'll see whether or not they can fix that this coming season. But yeah, I think it's a couple of years before Man United will be challenging for a league title again. And that's only if they get things right. If they stop these Hollywood signings, if they stop these public company signings, as I like to call them, the Pogba's for ridiculous money. Do the players suit the manager and fit the style of play you want to play? That is the approach Man United need to get into. At the moment, it's Hollywood signings, and majority of the time they don't actually mesh and fit what the club is trying to do from an on the pitch standpoint. So yeah, a lot to fix for Man United. I think next season, again, if they continue this style of football, it's another cup team. Hopefully for their sake, they will be trying to win one of the cups again. But yeah, in terms of league, I'm not giving them a chance. Maybe my tune might change towards the end of the window, but as it's constructed, as Man United has been run, I know there's new owners, but it takes a while to implement things. I'm not optimistic if I was a Man United fan in terms of league performance. Guys, I'm going to bring up Crystal Palace. They finished 10th. I think they finished the season really strong. To me, they're a dark horse next season. But it's all dependent on whether or not they can keep hold of the Olises, the Ezes. I know Eze, for example, is talks are happening with Tottenham Hotspur at the moment. So that is a player that they're likely to lose. It looks like they're going to lose him. Olise has obviously been touted. Many clubs are interested in him. A lot of them are sort of biding their time because of the price that is being asked for him. whether or not he leaves will be interesting to see. I know a lot of clubs that are really, really interested in him, and clubs that he would be okay moving to. Let's put it that way. But yeah, if I'm Crystal Palace, it's reinvesting that money wisely. I like the links that they've had to Eddie Nketiah. I know Mateta ended the season off in hot form, and I think Nketiah can play a role there. With Mateta playing, scoring goals, continuing that hot streak, but I think Eddie Nketiah could be an exciting signing for them. But yeah, as I said, the big ones are Olise, Eze, and then obviously Guehi, if the interest does solidify for him from the likes of Man United. If they can hold on to those players, I think I think Crystal Palace can make a challenge for those European spots next season, and sort of break this malaise that they've been in of once we hit the 40 points, we're good type of thing. Hopefully for Crystal Palace's sake, they do well. Fulham were a tad predictable team of the season to root for. We're obviously going to need to pick a new team heading into next season, but I think Fulham had to adjust their goals for last season. They were entering last season in very positive form. Like the way they ended the previous season, I think they had aspirations of finishing quite high up the table. And then obviously the Mitrovic thing happened and a few things didn't go their way in terms of the transfer window last season. They were able to hold on to Paulinho, which was great, fantastic for them. But I do think they had to sort of change their approach. They had to go back to rather let's stay in the league, stabilize, and we'll try again to build, opposed to we are stable and we're looking to elevate. That's what they were hoping to do, and they had to sort of reevaluate their goals, which is fine. It happens. It happens in the Premier League. But the important thing for them is that they stayed up this past season and they will look to propel themselves from there. And speaking of staying up, I don't think there was a club that needed to stay up more than Everton. I mean, I don't know how many lives Everton have, but they seem to stay up despite just the dread that's happening there. I mean, obviously the points deductions that they've had to face this season, then in previous season, the poor choices and coaches. I mean, hiring Frank Lampard as a coach and expecting him to do something after we've seen the evidence of his level of coaching. Look, I'm of the belief that yes, a player can be Frank Lampard is one of the greatest Premier League players of all time. He's a terrible manager. Those two things can be correct at the same time. I feel the same thing about Steven Gerrard. If you think it's my Liverpool bias coming in, I think Steven Gerrard is a poor manager. Phenomenal Liverpool player. One of my favorite players to watch growing up. Just not a great manager. Hopefully, for their sakes, they get to that level. They develop, they grow, they learn, and they become great managers in the future. I'm not saying that they can't. But at the moment, at this point in time, for what these clubs are trying to achieve, I do not think those are the managers that should be coming into managing Premier League teams. I think it's negligent, in my opinion, for clubs to be hiring the likes of Gerrard and Lampard off of their name from a Premier League perspective, not their name from a manager perspective. That's a subject I feel very strongly about. Yes, I'm all for giving people chances and all of that stuff, but come on. At least prove it. At least show that you can do the job at a competent level if we're going to entrust you with one of these Premier League clubs. We all know how important the game is. I can't with these managers that haven't proved that they deserve to be in charge of Premier League teams. I mean, just look at the caliber of managers that we have in the Premier League now. No disrespect to the likes of Aston Villa having an Unai Emery, for example, but there's levels to this game now. You've got managers who you would have never expected to be managing teams that maybe aren't as prolific as the teams that they've managed in the past, doing things and willing to go to clubs because of the allure of the Premier League. So when I start seeing teams like Everton hiring a Frank Lampard, I'm just thinking it's a recipe for disaster. But anyway, he stayed up. And then they did this whole PR campaign of making it a big thing that he kept them up when he brought them down to the relegation zone. Before he got there, they were fine, in terms of relegation battle. And he came in, brought them to the relegation battle, and then brought them out. And he's meant to be a hero. But okay, enough of me, beating up Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard as managers. Yeah, for Everton, the important thing was staying up this past season. Obviously, they need to fix things from an accounting standpoint. They need to fix things off the pitch. And then hopefully they can fix things on the pitch as well. I think the important thing for them this coming season, obviously we'll get to Everton's podcast when we get to it. But yeah, surely they need to get more goals into that team. Let's move on down the table. I think the interesting topic as well is the fact that all the promoted teams got relegated. And I heard people sort of discussing it and wondering why this was the case. And it's quite simple. If you look at the teams that did stay up, that were in sort of that relegation zone, you have the Nottingham Forests, the Brentfords, the Evertons, Wolves, if you want to throw them in there as well. But I think they were sort of fine for a good while. But look at the caliber of player those teams have. Yes, it's not constructed well from a, Everton standpoint. From a Nottingham standpoint, it's going to take time, especially when you bring that many amount of players into a team at one go, which is why it was important for them to stay up as well, because the continuity hopefully helps them next season, etc. Brentford, the big news for them obviously was the Ivan Toney suspension and the impact it had on their season, the Mbeumo injury, which was just horrific and something you don't want to see for a team like Brentford when a guy's playing so well for them. But yeah, I just think the talent in the other clubs was enough to see them through. And that's the difficult hump for teams that are getting promoted is, do they have the same level of talent as the teams that are in the Premier League? It's a lot harder for a Luton, for example, who, are coming to the Premier League sort of new, a Burnley that hadn't been in the Premier League successfully back to back for a while. So they've got a rotation of players. That's difficult. Sheffield United, another team that's used to being in the Premier League a while back, coming back in. That's difficult. Maybe a team like a Southampton, we know they're coming up, a Leicester, who were in the Premier League for lots of seasons, have sort of a nucleus of players that are Premier League players that stuck with the team. Then coming back to the Premier League, it's a lot easier for those teams to then stay up. I think it's a tall order with the money that gets thrown around in the Premier League for teams that haven't been there for a while to come in and stay. It's really, really hard, which is why you commend the Brightons, etc., for the jobs that they've done. Huge results for those type of teams. Guys, before I continue any further, I do want to implore you guys to go and check out Liberty Shield. Obviously, this podcast is sponsored by EPLindex.com in association with Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN service. It's very easy to install, really, really easy to use, and has a whole host of features. It can be used on multiple devices, whether you're traveling and you don't want to get locked out of your bank accounts, or you want to be safe whilst using public Wi-Fi. If you want to unlock geo-locked content, or you just want to protect your online data, then Liberty Shield is definitely for you. Guys, I use it all the time. I love it. Obviously, as many people know, and as the regular listeners know, I'm a huge fan of American sports. And it's not always shown here in the UK, but with Liberty Shield, it's a breeze being able to watch all of the sports. I've never had a sport where I'm not able to watch it just because of the location that I'm at. What a pleasure! What a pleasure it is to have products like that. So yeah, definitely go and check out Liberty Shield. If you use the coupon code EPL25, you'll get 25% off of either the router that obviously gets delivered to you, or the software VPN that downloads straight onto your devices, and you can sort of get going a lot quicker. But yeah, guys, I've broken down sort of my overarching thoughts on the Premier League season and how it went, highlighted some teams. Obviously, I left out teams, Tottenham, for example, and the disappointment of the injury to Van der Ven. Maybe we'll talk about him a bit later on in the podcast. But yeah, there were obviously 20 teams. I wasn't able to get through all of them, but we will probably delve deeper into those teams when we get into that series that I was promoting at the beginning of the show, where we're looking at each individual team. As I said, we'll discuss the season that's gone. We'll discuss their aims for next season. We'll discuss what they need to do this summer in order to achieve those goals. But let's move on to exciting stuff, the ATP Awards. But before we announce the winners, the runners up, and have a discussion about all of that, we are going to go to a break and we will be right back after this. All right, we are back. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. As I said, ATP Awards, the Tad Predictable Awards. I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I have a gripe with the English Premier League awards as they stand. I mean, you've got Young Player of the Year awards going to players that are like in their you have nominees of players who are like in their 40s. It's just ridiculous. I don't get how you have a Young Player award and it's going to players that are seasoned professionals that have been playing in the Premier League for years on end, or international football for years on end. They got international caps leaking out of them. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then obviously the player of the season. To me, it's just a popularity. It's a PR stunt. I can't forgive that award. If we go back a couple of years when it went to Jordan Henderson, and I'm just sitting there thinking, what? And it was all because there was a 2-month spell where he played well. And all of a sudden, that media hype, that PR drive, we know the pundits like to do it every now and then for certain things. All of a sudden, he was the darling and he should win the player of the year for 2 months, for 2 months worth of football. I'm sorry. If you watched Henderson the entire season, there's no way he was the best player in the Liverpool team, let alone in the Premier League. Come on now. So yeah, I've got an issue with the way those awards are done. So I'm going to give my awards, and obviously these are perfect. We've deliberated over them. We've discussed them. We've had battles over them, and I'm confident that the winners, the nominees, these awards are perfect. As I mentioned, coach of the season, I might as well start with that because we already spoke about it earlier. Congratulations to Aston Villa's Unai Emery, getting Aston Villa to 4th place, and not just 4th place, but having a deep run in Europe as well is not easy. It's not easy, man. And I think he's been a breath of fresh air. And obviously he took over one of those managers that I was being quite harsh to a bit earlier on in the podcast, in Steven Gerrard. And funny enough, on A Tad Predictable last year, so that would be the 22-23 season, the team for a Tad Predictable wasn't chosen before the season started because the podcast team wasn't quite sure which team to go with. At the time, we weren't sort of set on one team to root for that season. And the moment Gerrard got fired, all of a sudden everyone just looked at each other and said, Aston Villa? And yeah, Aston Villa became the team of the season for that season. Obviously, we saw how well they did last season, and they've just continued that into this season. So huge congratulations to Unai Emery. I think he's done a fantastic job there. I think the recruitment there has been good. Obviously, now Monchi is there. Oh, man, they're doing really, really cool things at Aston Villa. Obviously, some of the special mentions in there, we had the likes of Pep Guardiola, of course, winning the title. 4th title. I mean, it's not something you can sniff at. But as I said, to me, when it comes to Man City, their awards will always be sort of marred with this cloud until they either are proven guilty or innocent. And look, they will have their day in court. Let them have their day in court. But I find it weird that people go out of their way to not mention the fact that those charges do exist. They do exist. And as we said, we will see, how the deliberation, how the verdict goes with regards to that. So I do have to mention that. And probably you will see, in terms of team awards, player awards, coach awards, etc. I just think the degree of difficulty for Pep Guardiola is not that high when City have been skirting that grey area. As I said, whether they did it in a legal way or an illegal way, that's another argument. But I do think it would be naive to pretend like they haven't skirted with that grey area. And I know there's things like tax evasion and tax avoidance. Which one was City? Well, where did they land? I'm curious to see. All right, enough of that. Mikel Arteta obviously took Arsenal to the brink in terms of a title, continues their good sort of development under him, and the continuity continues. But I think, Aston Villa by far, pound for pound, was a far better performance than Arsenal challenging for the title. I think those were the three for me. I didn't really see anyone else. There wasn't a plucky team. I mean, look, there were shouts, and this is probably where the deliberation sort of really kicked in, was with regards to whether or not Oliver Glasner could qualify for the award. But obviously, we know he came in the middle of the season. I was of the opinion that he should be nominated. I was outvoted by the panel. So he gets an honorable mention by me because I have the microphone. But yeah, he unfortunately didn't make the shortlist, much to my dismay, and not a lack of effort from my part to try and get him on there. But at least we got him a shout out on the podcast. I thought he did a phenomenal job for them last season. And as I said, I think they're going to be a dark horse for next season. Let's move on to player of the season. Now, the way we assess player of the season on this podcast is we look at most valuable player. Okay, we don't look at 2-month spells in April and May, or March and April, and sort of decide on that. And I think there's, when we look at it from that perspective, over the course of the season, who was the most valuable player for their team? It has to be Rodri. It's not even a debate. It's Rodri. The guy is the engine of that Man City team. We've seen the way they perform when he's not there, and we've seen the way they perform when he is there. He's undoubtedly the best player in his position. He's undoubtedly one of the best players in the world right now. Rodri is an absolute Rolls Royce player. He just cleans up everything. He's like the janitor for that Man City team. You struggle to break on the counter-attack against them because he just sweeps everything up. And then, not just that, look at the amount of important goals he scores. And I classify those as goals when it's 0-0, or goals when you're leading by 1 or losing by 1. Because we know their team, we know their players that stat pad, that score goals when the team is 3-4-0 up. And come on, dude. What are you doing when it's 0-0? Rodri usually steps up with crucial goals. And for a defensive midfielder, that's insane. Yeah, so Rodri was the winner there. I'll mention the other nominees. Cole Palmer, obviously shout out to him. I do think from the discussions we had, the penalties, I mean, you still have to score a penalty, and credit to him for scoring so many penalties, but he did have a lot of penalties which sort of increased his stats for this season. But I do think in terms of value for Chelsea, a team that was, as I said, disjointed and with a lot of new players and no chemistry, I thought he stepped up in a big way for such a young player as well. So credit to him. He was one of the runners up. I think Declan Rice was valuable in that Arsenal team. I think he brought some steel to that Arsenal midfield. I think he brought some energy to that Arsenal midfield. And the good thing about Rice is he came in at a really good, like if you look at the Arsenal squad and the way they're built, the age profile is really good. They're all entering their peak at the same age, and it's really, really fascinating to watch. Some other shout outs, Douglas Luiz, who I thought was invaluable. Obviously, Aston Villa, they performed well this season. It starts with Douglas Luiz for me. I think he's just such a tidy player in that midfield for them. The next nominee was Ross Barkley. And again, I'm talking valuable players. Look at the impact Ross Barkley had for Luton. Many people, when Luton came up, immediately they were the first team on people's team sheets in terms of who's going to get relegated. Luton was there. Obviously, shout out to executive producer Guy Drinkle, who, when we did our reckless prediction podcast at the beginning of the year, he had Luton staying up as one of his predictions, and obviously he almost got it, So credit to them for the effort they had this season. But yeah, I think Ross Barkley really was sort of like a spark plug for that Luton side, and his efforts should not be undermined just because of the fact that they got relegated. I think, as I say, pound for pound, in terms of value to their team, I think Ross Barkley really ignited something in that Luton team and helped them get as high up as they did end up getting. And obviously, in the end, they fell short, but still, I think his impact was felt. Let's move on to the last person that was nominated, and it was Vicario from Tottenham. And the argument that was put forward was, you're a goalkeeper, a young goalkeeper at that, coming into the Premier League. We know how physical the Premier League, and obviously he had his issues when it came to corners and the way teams were sort of setting up how they took corners and where they stood when it came to him. But I do think he looked really impressive. And if you look at Spurs in recent seasons, look, I've never been a big fan of Hugo Lloris. Yes, talented. Yes, agility wise, one of the best from that perspective. But if you look at a lot of Hugo's play, his parrying always worried me. He always used to parry the ball into dangerous situations. Instead of parrying it away from goal, out of the dangerous areas, he always used to just parry it towards another team's striker or in the vicinity, and it always irked me. But yeah, I think Tottenham have found their long-term goalkeeper for the next 10 years maybe, if injuries are kind to the young guy. I think it's invaluable finding a goalkeeper that you can say, look, he's there for 10 years. We don't have to worry about that position. Let's go and fix other positions. So yeah, shout out to him. I thought, especially in, coming into the Premier League, the expectation. Spurs are one of those clubs that have really high expectations. Sometimes they can't always deliver. Sometimes the expectations are too high for the squad that they have or the situation that they're in. But yeah, I thought he handled everything really well and was a breath of fresh air. At one point, he was challenging Alisson Becker for Premier League's best goalkeeper, which is impressive coming into the Premier League and stamping your authority like that. So I'm looking forward to good things for him going forward. All right, let's move on to our next award. This one is Rookie of the Season. You heard me complaining about the 40-year-olds that get nominated for Young Player of the Year in the EPL awards as they currently stand. This one, Rookie of the Season, you must still be 20 years old or younger when the season ends. So that was our cutoff. Were you 20 or younger when the season ended? And obviously, it has to be your debut season in the Premier League. I think that's the route that they should take. Stop nominating the Fodens and the Haalands for Young Player of the Year. Rather shine the light on a young player in their 20s or younger. So, and coming into the Premier League in their first season and making an impact. That's who I think should be highlighted. And in terms of nominees, we had 3 nominees for that qualified for that. We had Destiny Udogie, left back for Tottenham Hotspurs, Liverpool centre back Kwanzaa, and Chelsea right back Gusto. Now, obviously, I'll deal with them in sort of ascending order, maybe. Kwanzaa, I don't think he was expecting, and I don't think Liverpool were expecting him to play as much as he ended up playing this season. I thought he held himself really, really well, and I think he cemented himself in that Liverpool squad going forward. I think he has put question marks over whether Liverpool let me rephrase this. I think Liverpool are more willing to sell Konate after having seen what Kwanzaa has done this season than they were before this season. I think the succession plan for Liverpool was Konate becomes the leader of that defense once Virgil van Dijk obviously reduces his impact with age and all of that stuff, or if he leaves, etc., etc. It was going to be Konate was the heir apparent. I think it's Kwanzaa now. I genuinely think it's Kwanzaa. He's composed. He's really, really good with the ball at his feet. He's quite intelligent in terms of his movement from a defensive standpoint. He's not necessarily the quickest, but his positioning is really good, which is always important. So yeah, very impressed with him. Gusto obviously comes into that Chelsea team, another one of their wonder kids that they signed. I thought he held his own. Obviously, he's competing on that side with Reece James whenever Reece James is fit and available. One of those players that unfortunately the injury bug just always seems to hit him. Hopefully he can shake that. But yeah, in terms of Gusto, I thought he performed really, really well this season. I thought he was a solid addition, a smart signing for Chelsea. Even if you have a Reece James, bringing in a young, hungry right back that's looking to prove himself as an understudy that ends up becoming sort of the starter there. I think it worked out quite well for Chelsea from that perspective. But the winner, Destiny Udogie, we mentioned Udogie a bit earlier. I think he was phenomenal for Spurs this season. Obviously, you can still see from a defensive standpoint, he's got things that he needs to fix. But from an attacking standpoint, sort of being that inverted, off the ball runner, he reminds me of, and I know he's playing left back, but he reminds me of what Jordan Henderson used to do for Liverpool, a couple of seasons back, where he's the engine that drives into the box and he's sort of looking for any pieces. He's looking to pull runners away and it just creates space. He's just there to create havoc for the defenders because they don't know who's going to be picking that person up. And as I said, Jordan Henderson would do that from midfield and had a great engine for it and was phenomenal to see. I think Udogie is doing that, but from the left back role, which is pretty cool. So we've seen him pop up in the box at times, and if he can iron out the finishing, the decision making, I think he's onto something. But yeah, he was our rookie of the season. As I said, you must still be 20 years old or younger when the season ends in your debut season. So congratulations to him. And then last but not least, the award for signing of the season. The nominees were, it says here, Van der Ven in brackets, if he could stay fit. So obviously that's an honorary mention to him. I thought his impact was massive for Spurs, and I'm sure Spurs fans will agree and share that sentiment because we saw what happened to them when he was out for extended periods of time. It would be important for them that they manage him correctly and make sure he's on the pitch more than he's off the pitch. And I'm very, very cautious with him now because hamstring injuries for fast players, it can become a really, really big problem for him going forward. Spurs have to take their time. They have to manage him correctly. Don't rush him back when he gets hamstring injuries. Yes, I know it's important that you want, you got goals and aspirations that you want to reach, but think of the long term. This guy could be the centerpiece of your defense for the next however many years. They have to be careful with the guy. But anyway, yeah, so he's an honorary mention. He didn't win it. Ross Barkley, I mentioned earlier, obviously he was there in the conversation for player of the season. And as I said, we sort of, it's MVP, of the season for us. Ross Barkley, huge impact for Luton. As I said, he drove that team. He was the spark. He was sort of that little flair that they could add into games. He also had that composure and know-how of, I've been here, I've been in this league. He had a presence about him in that team, and I think it just brought the best out of everyone around him. So he was phenomenal. Declan Rice is in there as well as a shout. As I said, bags of energy, big goals in big games for Arsenal. What a signing. Obviously, when you spend big like that, you're expecting returns. I thought he was really solid for them and is going to be for many years to come. But the winner was Cole Palmer. Yes, I know he's stat padded a bit with the penalties, but man, oh man, what a signing for Chelsea. And this is the thing with Man City. They can afford to get rid of a Cole Palmer. How many of us, other teams could get rid of a Cole Palmer and still go on and not miss him, so to speak? Yeah, phenomenal season for him. Hopefully he continues to grow next season, but congratulations on being the signing of the season. But guys, yeah, those were the A Tad Predictable Awards for 23-24 season. And with that, I think it's a good place to sort of archive the season. We're done with it. We are now looking ahead to next season. Obviously, as we say, we've got a whole transfer window. We've got a whole summer to get through, and we will walk with you through that journey. We'll give you, don't worry, we'll give you the lowdown on what teams can expect, what they're hoping to do. Cause it's kind of hard to keep up with all of that. So we'll do the grunt work. We'll do the behind the scenes work. Don't worry. The team here works really, really hard. Guy keeps them in shape. And we'll just give you nice little tidbits, nice little information that you guys can walk around with, feel like you're learning a bit more about the teams, and maybe we can throw in some of the business side of things, from, club mentality and what they will be thinking, the suits upstairs will be thinking from a club perspective. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this post-season podcast. Obviously, a different role for me, a different hat. I'm used to hosting guests on A Tad Predictable each game week. These ones are going to be solo. Maybe we'll bring in a guest every now and then, but majority of them are going to be solo. And then we'll see how that goes. And then obviously next season, when the season starts, we'll be back to the original, the one you know and love, A Tad Predictable, where we do score predictions for each game week. But guys, that's going to do it from my end. Go and check out all the content on EPL Index website. If you want to keep up with all the transfer news this off-season, EPL Index has you covered. Every single thing is reported. Every single thing is taken care of from that perspective. Go and check out the Daily Show, the Two-Footer Podcast with Dave Hendrick, where he discusses the hottest topics in football. Guys, go and also check out EPL Roundtable, where Kev De Vries sits down with panelists from respective EPL teams. He sort of also does reviewing of the Premier League. It's mostly an in-season show. I'm not sure if Kev's going to be doing a post-season one, but yeah, Dave certainly will be doing his Two-Footer Podcast, so keep an eye out for that one. Go and follow at EPL Index on Twitter. Go follow at A Tad Predictable on Twitter. Subscribe to EPL Index on your podcast channels and your podcast providers. Guys, if you give us 5 stars, if you feel so inclined, write positive comments. That stuff really goes a long way. I've been Tadiwa Chinekere. You can find me on my Twitter handle at TadPredict as Guy hits my music. Thank you, good sir. Huge thank you to Obi Semenya. He's at John Empire SA. And Jody, she's at Spursy141 for our intros that they do. Obviously, I'm looking forward to the new intros kicking in for next season. They always do a brand new one each season, which is pretty cool. Our producer behind the glass, huge thank you to Mr. Guy Drinkle. He's at Guy Drinkle on Twitter. He is the Bank or Burner champion for the 23-24 season with an asterisk. And remember, Chisinga Perry, Chino Shura.
What a strike from Yuri Tielemans. De Bruyne. That is what Martinelli gorgeous. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again. City have won the Premier League.
Sports Social Podcast Network.